I'm gonna start just by chopping everything, like onions are gonna be a little less than 1 inch, just so that they kind of disappear into the soup. Yams will be about 1 inch, so you have some nice chunks to get your spoon on. Okay, onion and garlic are going in the pot. Put the pot over there. Put a little bit of oil. Okay, and while the onion and garlic are doing their thing back there on medium heat, use ground cumin if you have it. I didn't have any pre-ground, so I'm doing some extra work for it. But you can grind your cumin. All right, good enough. For a quick lunch soup, it's good. I'm gonna add my paprika. That's how I measure. Pop it in. And just give this a little stir around. And turn it down a little while I get my yams in there. And this is pretty quick, so I'm just cutting off any bits of yams. I keep the skin of the yams on because the skin holds the yam together when it cooks. If you peel the yam, then you will get mushy pieces of yam instead of yam that kind of holds together. I'm just doing, you know, something that's like a bite-sized chunk. And they're around 1 inch thick. You can see it's about the width of a thumb. And meanwhile, I'm going to take all the leaves off of my oregano and get that ready to go in the pot too. So my onions are cooking with the spices in here. You can see they're starting to look a little bit brown. That's mostly from the cumin. They're not actually caramelized yet. But I am creating a little bit of sweetness still and making sure that that like raw onion flavor is all cooked out without the spices catching on the bottom. And you know, this is a very, very simple soup. Just simple ingredients in here. And the trick of this really is about kind of layering the flavors, because we aren't adding a whole bunch of stuff. We want to add them at the right time and then give them the time to cook that they need. So I'm going to go ahead and add my oregano and sun-dried tomato. Okay, I just want to take a second to talk about oregano. So sometimes folks ask about like when is the right time to add herbs during cooking. Generally, the hard herbs like rosemary, sage, and thyme will be added at the beginning of cooking because they have strong flavors that need heat to like permeate and really let the flavors out. Then you've got your herbs like cilantro and parsley and dill and tarragon, and those should be added at the end of cooking once you take it off the heat, because they are very delicate and they wilt and they bruise. Oregano is somewhere in the middle. It has a delicate leaf, like a little basil, but it has a more assertive flavor than the other delicate ones. So it is one that you can add during cooking and at the end of cooking. And dried is a totally acceptable form of oregano. The flavor dries pretty well. When you're buying dried oregano, try to make sure it's a nice bright green color and that you're not getting kind of like a straw colored oregano. Okay, so I have fresh oregano and I'm gonna add my amount here, but I need to get cracking because it's starting to catch on the bottom. So now's the time to add your liquid. liquid added. No, I'm not, instead of time crunch. Your sun-dried tomatoes could go before or after your liquid. These are just going to create like a flavorful broth. And again, this is not a tomato-based dish. It's just benefiting from the bit of sweetness and acidity that sun-dried tomatoes have. They have a lot of like umami flavor, kind of flavor punch all packed in here compared to fresh tomatoes and even compared to canned tomatoes. So in you go. I'm going to let that simmer for a few minutes and give it some love with some nice salt. If you add salt during cooking, it builds on layers of flavor, and you will find that you actually use less salt in total than if you try to all put it in at the end. And then humble canned beans can go in now, and then some of the flavors of that soup will soak into the beans. So we'll see you in a few minutes after this has simmered and the yams are soft. Don't forget to drain and rinse your beans. Okay, so as you can see, the yams are cooked down. I don't know if you can see if they're cooked, but they are. When they slide off easily from a knife. And I'm gonna recommend that you half blend the soup. So I like to use my hand mixer and just stomp it and give it a few good pulses, but I want to leave some of those nice big chunks in there as well. So I'm just creating more body in the soup by doing this. Another way to do that is take half of the soup and put it in the blender, mix in the blender, and then add it back. So now I'm going to make sure it's the right consistency. The recipe calls for, you know, like medium-sized yams. So these ones, they're about medium-sized. That's a consistency of soup that I like for like a hearty lunch soup. You can go ahead and squeeze some lime into it now, but I like to reserve some limes for garnishing. And then you gotta taste, which really is the most important part. Okay, I'm doing pretty good. I need just a pinch more salt. Now, this tastes pretty sweet, but again, the lime that I'm adding as a garnish is gonna be key to bringing this all together. Oh, the last part, the greens. Put the cooking greens in when your soup is still hot. And honestly, for spinach, this is enough residual heat to cook it down. You could put it on the stove for another minute. I can already see these kind of wilting in there. I like nice whole leaves of baby spinach, but if you got the big spinach, then chop it up. And then we've got this kind of consistency. All right. So let's plate this up.